911!
Welcome back, nerds. Fino here with a guide for Union Defense Knights Barghest, aka Summer Barghest. She's a limited 4-star archer and shares a banner with her fellow fairy knights, Balban Shi and Melusine. Naturally, Murphy's Law implies that if you go for one of those, you'll get 5 copies of the others first, so you should know how to handle your inevitable firefighting man-eater. Let's start with her noble phantasm, Water Save Galatine. It's an AoE arch attack that purges offensive buffs and puts out any fires on whatever it hits. It also has a preemptive 1-turn arts buff tied to overcharge. The hit count is nothing special and odds are Barghest will need assistance to do consecutive noble phantasms. No, what makes Water Save Galatine special is its interaction with Barghest's 3rd skill. Strike Weather is a 3-turn NP damage buff that gives her the super large trait. That part is pure flavor. It presently has no useful applications and just opens you up to taking bonus damage from enemies with that anti-trait. But aside from that, it also gives you a prompt, AoE or single target. For its duration, Strike Weather modifies Water Save Galatine into one of those 2 modes. It's AoE by default, but picking AoE lets you get the NP damage buff either way. The single target version is notable for having the increased damage scaling that you'd expect from a single target NP, but it also maintains its card type. This puts her in stark contrast to Lancer Melusine and the upcoming Archer Ptolemy. Those servants expect you to commit to either their arts or buster modes outside of very specific situations. Even though with Ptolemy you start as the opposite form of the one you want, you generally don't switch back and forth after that initial setup. The significance of this is that Barghest has much more tactical flexibility than Melusine or Ptolemy, who have more of a strategic focus. Ptolemy drinks from the same archer pond, so let's focus down on the 2. Ptolemy blows Barghest away in the damage department, as either a single target buster archer or an AoE arts archer, but he has to decide which hat he's wearing ahead of time. If you try and do both in the same fight, you'll stumble and probably botch one of the 2 roles. Barghest has the ability to do both on the fly, though this isn't without its own flaws. For one, Water Save Galatine may gain the power of a single target noble phantasm, but it doesn't have a consolidated hit count. The AoE version has 4 hits, and the single target version also has 4 hits. Honestly, I think they could have just split the difference and given her 8 hits, and it would have been fine. But the consequence is that your single target refund is fucking awful, and Barghest needs even more babysitting in this configuration. Not the biggest problem in single core, but it can complicate her multi-core applications. Single core has something else to worry about. Let's go over a hypothetical situation. You're up against a 313 Saber node. You keep Strike Weather in reserve and just attack with your default NP. No problem. Then you get to the single enemy. You can switch to single target, but this puts you in an awkward spot for the final wave, because you can't just toggle off Strike Weather whenever you want. Once it starts, you have to wait until it runs its course before you get your AoE NP back. The solutions are a bit awkward. Option 1A is to keep Barghest in her AoE form the entire time, thus invalidating the tactical option of going single target. Option 1B is to go multi-core with a different single target attacker, which has a similar consequence to 1A. Option 2 is to run a second AoE for the final wave. Doable, but still awkward. Now what I described is pretty much the worst case scenario for Barghest. You won't get screwed to this extent all the time, but you do need to be aware of her limitations. By contrast, you can see her virtues in a 311 node, where she can make the swap pretty much without consequence. In other words, she excels in fights where the enemy count decreases or stays the same over time, but not when it increases. Next, we need to factor in the effects of our first skill, Union Defense Knights. It's a 3-turn attack and crit damage combo that comes with an on-hit buff to heal your party for 500 health. However, if a low rarity servant is on the field, 3-star or below, it gains another pair of effects, a second attack buff and stars per turn. This means you have an incentive to frontline Ju Fu, which is great news for low econ players, but it also means that in boss fights where your craft essence efficiency doesn't matter, equipping her with Outrage and putting her before your second Castoria lets you reap all the benefits while keeping your charge chain going. Regardless of how you get it, this extra buff helps to bridge some of the missing damage she has relative to someone like Ptolemy, especially in regards to her single target mode, so you should take advantage of it when you can. There are other notable options for low rarity allies. For early game players, Paracelsus can handle a wave while providing Barghest with relevant buffs, and Anderson gives charge and stars per turn, plus a number of other buffs to help her crit follow-up. 2 servants that have niche mid to late game applications are Arash and Chen Gong. Arash lines up with Barghest's class advantage, so you can have him deal with an AoE wave or relatively low health cannon fodder in a late wave. This can get you around Barghest's weakness of increasing enemy counts. As for Chen Gong, he can clear AoE waves while nuking your expended supports. This feeds in fresh charges for both himself and Barghest. The catch with him is that your upfront cost in terms of grails and foes is going to be much higher than with Arash. That leaves Queen's Keeper. This is a 30% battery. You'll want to pair that with her starting charge append to hit an even 50. Then there are a number of buffs that work on her allies, but not herself. 1 turn of invulnerability, a 3k heal, and 1 turn of cooldown reduction. This package can take a significant amount of pressure off your supports. Castoria is the obvious beneficiary, but the cooldown reduction pairs nicely with Tamamo no Mae, and the protection works well with someone like Asclepius, who can trigger the bonus attack on Union Defense Knights. These servants, or perhaps Lady Avalon, can give you quite a bit of longevity to slug it out in slow, grinding boss fights. For mixed Saber/Assassin nodes, I want to point out that Barghest works nicely with Ashe the Savior, since she can shave a turn off her battery and then benefit from Last Resort's party-wide charge, letting you 2-tap the final wave. For an all-rounder setup, I'd recommend going with Black Grail and UDK Barghest if you have it, or Ocean Flyer if you don't. You can go a number of ways with command codes, but I like Mage of Flowers to cheat out extra charge, Da Vinci for NP damage, and then Flat Star codes to increase the consistency of your crits. Team-wise, if a single core approach isn't working out, I'd recommend pairing her with a reliable single-target archer like Squirtoria, or a powerful single-target berserker like Summer Castoria. This lets you keep UDK Barghest in her AoE configuration as long as possible, while keeping the option of going single-target in the final wave. Either she and your Artori of choice can double-team a lone boss, or in fights where there's a very beefy side enemy, Barghest can split off and handle that enemy herself, in situations where her AoE contribution is inadequate. In other words, you can do some creative things based on the number of remaining enemies. One thing I haven't mentioned yet is a very strange passive, Thundercloud Eater. This makes Barghest immune to burn and burn amplifiers, but only if the battlefield is already on fire. In this situation, she gets 5% charge per turn too. Really wish this was a passive that didn't have any terrain requirement, because there's no practical reason to bring a fire starter just to take advantage of it. Little too much flavor. For anyone that missed my contentious Top 10 Servants of 2025 video, UDK Barghest ended up at number 9, 1 placement higher than Durga. Ptolemy didn't make the list. Spoiler. Her lack of an anti-buff is a pretty big detriment, and definitely a mark against her compared to someone like Durga. But I'm a very big proponent of servants with tactical flexibility, and Barghest embodies this to a very large degree. Being able to switch from AoE to single target while maintaining the same card type is something that no other servant in this game can presently do. The closest we have is King Ashoka, who maintains an AoE NP, but gains additional NP damage against isolated enemies. A sufficiently invested Barghest can fill both the generic single target and AoE roles, but also narrow down her focus as a fight progresses. She can perform both functions in the same fight, thus freeing up other options in terms of team building. You can go with a blowout single target like Zergtoria, a robust AoE like Summer Ibuki, or even a range of low rarity options to get that additional attack buff. You can get pretty creative with Barghest compositions, and it goes beyond the level of a mere gimmick. There's actual value to exploring your options versus just running 2 Castorias and calling it a day, though that's also on the table. Her low rarity synergy is especially nice for players with new or underdeveloped accounts, and this is the type of player that benefits disproportionately from her flexibility. She can operate as one of those pillars in account building that start useful and scale very well into the late game. Barghest does all the heavy lifting at first, and then settles into backup for more specialized servants down the road. Your specialist handles the biggest problem in the encounter, while Barghest takes care of the rest. If you plan to make Barghest a part of your late game repertoire, I strongly recommend getting NP5 and keeping Grails on the table. That's just one of the downsides of being a 4-star servant. If you want to overcome the lower stat cap, you'll have to make sacrifices at some point. So when should you roll for Barghest? This year she shows up alongside Summer Melusine and Kate Cook her Priestess, which is a relatively high value combination. Really, the only mark against it is that it's opposite Zergtoria's own banner, and she's an infinitely higher priority. Lucky for you, the same combo comes back next July, giving you a chance to pick up anyone you missed. After that, you'll have to wait till February 2027 when the class banners get rolling. She has second billing after King Tut, who's an interesting servant, but not someone I'd go out of my way to get. We can expect a reprise of this last banner once the Grand Archer campaign gets underway. So, are you all meta sheep like me? Gonna leave your hungry waifu waiting so you can schmooze with Castoria? Or are you going to be a rebel and fish for Barghest in the Smelu banner? This week I've got quite a gotcha gauntlet to handle at twitch.tv/Finotaisen, where I stream every weekend, 3 p.m. Pacific time. On Friday I'll be rolling for Eve and Nikkei's Stellar Blade crossover, also playing Stellar Blade itself on the same day. Saturday's agenda is to finish FGO's Wings of Lacrimation and NA's Paper Moon. Lastly, I'll be rolling for Saber Medusa on Sunday and diving into the Mystic Eye Symphony. So stop by if you want to see my utter hatred of financial stability in action. See you there.